Yes, my name is Elizabeth Bussey. I go by Liz, and I'm one of the owners of Warehouse here in Lexington, Kentucky. Well, for me personally, it started out, I just enjoyed thrifting for myself, and then people came to me and they were like, Liz, you're spending too much money. And I was like, how can I do this and make money? How can I do this and still buy stuff for myself? So I just started selling anything, like, Lululemon, Free People, and I would pick certain vintage pieces just that matched my style. I was working at a really crappy job. I'm not gonna lie, at Charming Charlie before they reopened, and it was very mentally draining. I was working as the assistant store manager, but it was one of those situations where you're just not getting paid enough for what you're doing. You're like, this is not worth it. And it was really draining mentally, and that's actually kind of how I met Shonda. And then like in the span of 2 months, they were closing all the Charming Charlies, so I was losing my job, and she was like, do this with me full time. And I was already kind of thinking about it because I was already selling on Poshmark. I was already, in the reselling, world. But I never thought that I would actually have the courage to do it. And then when Shonda said that, I was like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. If I can work that hard for someone else, I can work that hard for myself, And yeah, that happened summer 2019, and I've really never looked back, and I don't think I could ever work for anyone ever again. I really fell in love with vintage for just like more than the sustainability aspect, but like just the preservation of these pieces in history. Like they're, some of them are one of a kind, custom tailored, and to get to know the history of those pieces and who wore them, like that's super important. So anywhere and everywhere we can find it, we do. Like, so we go thrifting, obviously, that's kind of how we started. And then we meet people. Shonda can talk to anybody. If she sees something on your porch, she'll knock on your door and be like, is that for sale? Like, she can talk to anybody about vintage and all that stuff. So networking and finding people who are like, oh, my grandfather passed away and he had his barn full of stuff. And we go through barns, we go through warehouses, we meet people and just go through their personal collections. People will bring stuff in now because they know we're here. So really anywhere and everywhere we will find it. That is our most expensive piece in the shop right now. It's a 1980s Hollywood Regency style solid brass swan table. So it's got like a wood base and then 2 huge swan like sculptures on it with a glass top, and it's beautiful. And I freaked out when I found it, but we found it online on a few websites for ranging between $4,000 and $4,500. So we have it for $2,000. Which I still think is great. And then I said, if I didn't live in a tiny home, I would totally have it in my house. Recently, we just had a woman come in, and her dad was a UK football player in like 1959. He played on I don't know if it was like the JV team at the time. I don't know if colleges did that, but something like that, where he wasn't a starter, but he was on the UK football team. And he was dating his high school sweetheart. They got married. They were from like Eastern Kentucky. So once they came into money, he just was like, anything you want, let's go to Thailand and I'll buy you dresses and all this stuff. So she brought in some of her dresses from her mother, and they were just these beautiful, like crazy patterns, like just stuff you don't find at your local thrift store. Everything from this woman was like custom tailored to her body, like from small designers. That's another thing with vintage. It's all small designers. So when you look them up, like half the time you don't even know who they are because they lived in a small town like Lexington, and But yeah, this one's beautiful. And we had a woman named Kathy come in, and I can't even remember what she said. She was like, oh, that 1907 je ne sais la up there. And I was like, what? And she had to like bring me up here and show me this piece. And we need to ask her what it was again, but it's from 1907, and it's what women wore to travel, like on trains. This is like, they're just everyday attire. They're traveling attire. So that's something that's like, it's not for sale, but like, we have it. But we have plans on expanding and making this not just a typical vintage shop, but having more interactive experiences with it, and having, without giving anything away, cool glimpses of fashion and just things like that aren't necessarily you're coming in here to buy. You're coming in here to like learn about the pieces and, have that experience with it. So we have plans like that. And then we have thought about, 10 years down the line, who knows, we might want to open a new location. But we really love Lexington, and we love you know, being local and being here and being able to be here every day, like, that's really important to us. So, yeah. So I made this top. We were doing a fashion show with the University of Kentucky, and the concept behind it was really to keep fur that's already been used out of landfills. And now, unfortunately, furriers don't repair fur coats anymore. So a lot of them that are damaged get thrown away anyway. So we took a fur coat and made this top, and then we added these chains, and it went down the runway, and this beautiful woman named Ava, she wore it on the runway, and she actually wore it with these pants. And it was awesome. So yeah, that used to be a coat and now it's a top, and this was in a fashion show. Don't be perfect about it. Don't worry if, you know, your logo's not perfect. Don't worry if you don't have the perfect packaging. We use recycled packaging. Like, all my boxes have the Amazon tape on them. Like, don't worry about being perfect, you know, and don't worry about competing in the way that, like, social media makes you think that somebody else is doing so well. Don't think that because you have less followers than them that your followers don't like you just as much as their followers like them, you know, or just don't be discouraged by thinking about how other people are doing things, because that can be very hard when you're in any kind of business and you're seeing other businesses and the way that they are thriving or the way that they are like putting on a persona that they're thriving, and you don't know, you know. So definitely know that it's your journey, and don't go fast. Definitely take your time with it. You don't need $100,000 in business loans. Like, you can literally start from scratch and build your own racks and eventually buy racks, or eventually, you know, it doesn't have to be big all at once. You start small and work your way up, and then it'll turn into your perfect little mess.